Wait, what'd you say? There's a spider beside me. What is going on, everybody, and welcome back into Byerly Studios. Now, today in the studio is a very special video. I'm putting kind of a collection of all of the content that I've been creating for an awesome project. Now, that being a commission for an awesome customer out of Germany. Now, over the last year or so, I have created an amazing cast and mold of a spider that I had created out of monster clay. I created it so that I could reproduce it over and over again and get the same results all the time, while giving the overall item different bases. Now, this is the spider that I have casted previously and sold on a medium to rectangle base. And that was the original. Now, we're going to get back to the improvements that I've made to the design as we get through the video. So don't worry about that. We'll get to that. We'll get to the fun parts. Now, as of right now, I offer it in 3 different sizes. I offer the medium rectangle, which is the original size that I created. I offer a small oval size, and then I also offer this. What I really wanted to do is challenge myself in the creation process. Is I wanted to create an abstract raised base, a rock formation with the spider way up high, projected off of the tabletop, right? And that's what this project was. The customer ordered option number 3, the gold standard, and this is what that project entails. Now, don't worry, guys. We're going to zoom in here in just a minute, and we're going to stop monologuing. We're just going to get into the actual content itself of me showing you a lot of the highlight clips of even some of the full-length videos that I've already created for this project, of me creating this from the bottom all the way to the top. And now some of those videos, if I've already created them previously for the original 2.0 version instead of this 3.0 version or the gold version, then those videos may not exist. I may have just kind of skipped over those little highlight clips and moved on to the next portion of something that I really haven't shown here in the studio before. But just remember, again, if you want to see any of the full-length content clips for any of these portions of the build, make sure you check out the Goliath Birdeater Tarantula Diorama playlist on my YouTube channel, because I did create this one on top of the medium-sized one and improve the overall process. I have a multitude of videos that you guys can check out and just enjoy binge watching. You don't have to necessarily create something like this, but if you're creating something similar with a rock formation or moss or casting or log or bark or leaves or something like that, maybe even water features, then you can definitely check that out, okay? So let's go ahead and zoom in here, guys, and let's check this bad boy out. So we're over here at the item now, and we're going to start working through the overall description of what we have created here. So we started off at the very beginning of the process with just making a mental list of the things that I need to create such a large project. Whether you're deep into art or not, or you create a lot of creations, or you just do canvas work or do dioramas, just doing a piece of canvas work is different because you just have your canvas and you have paintings and paintbrushes and things like that. But when you do something this intricate, you're using a lot of materials. I'll probably even add it up, and I'll put up here at the very top how many different types of materials, glues, and everything that I use to create this item. And it is substantial, guys. I mean, so you have to have a lot of things to try to create something this big. Otherwise, you're just kind of scraping the barrel and just making do with what you have, right? Now, we started this project off in the workshop itself. We created this base starting off with a 2-inch deep medallion of wood, as well as a upper piece here, and this may be like a half an inch depth of wood. Now, these are both like little half medallion cuts that you can get from like Hobby Lobby and Michaels. I definitely splurged a little bit on these because I really wanted to get a good grade of bark around the exterior, because I knew in my mind's eye about the project what's going to be visible to the customer and to anybody viewing this piece of artwork. Now, I did have one piece of wood buckle along the way through the process, and I had to return it. Hobby Lobby was very understanding, and then they did return. They took that as a return, and I swapped it out. Okay, so I did get a secondary one of these, and I had to stain it on a separate day. And because of that, it extended the overall dry time of the item, which means I had to add a few days to the wait time to create the item. So everything throughout the process has to have its own dry time before you can move on to the next stage. I mean, you can line things up or whatnot, but sometimes you really just have to create things in the correct order for everything to fall into place, right? You got to work from the base up, especially when you're building on top of the actual base unit. Now, we stained this in a nice mahogany color, and it has darkened up a little bit throughout the dyeing processes. of later stages, but it turned out very good. At that point, we moved on to actual foam work of the base unit, and we use foam on the base because we want to reduce the overall weight that we have to ship, while creating the same overall structural integrity that we're looking for an item of this size. No one wants to receive an item and then it just be busted to pieces. Okay, so we start off with foam to reduce the overall weight. If we had created this out of dense clay, this would be 30-40 pounds in clay to be shipped, and we just aren't doing that, especially since it's going to Germany. Shipping's already going to be pretty high. So we did foam to reduce the weight, right? So we created a foam with the peroxide saw and the hot wire cutter. You can find all of the products that I use in my affiliated Amazon link below. If you want to check out anything that I use in any of the creation videos, it's in there. If I don't use it, it's not there, guys. If I don't use it in my workshop or my art studio, it's not in my Amazon affiliate list, okay? So you can see all sorts of stuff down there. Well, so once we had our layers cut, we went ahead and started gluing them together with Gorilla Glue here. Now, we layered those in with Gorilla Glue because Gorilla Glue really doesn't melt the foam opposed to, like, say, an aerosol can or something like that. So we were able to get a really good bond through all of those layers. Now, one thing that you'll notice that I did for the base is I actually used threaded rods, and I shot 3 of them through the foam as well as the base plate and top plate, and we used hardware washers and nuts to tighten it all together. And what that does here is it tightens this down and creates a really strong structure. So it bound all of the foam pieces together, and you would actually see the glue shooting out of the outside edges of the foam because it pushed it out like a sandwich, right? Like that PB&J that you're squeezing, the PB&J and the jelly is just pushing out the sides of it. Same concept. It created a sandwich effect, and but that is not a big deal. It turned out absolutely great, and it's extremely strong. That foam is never going to come apart. So once we had that done, we were done with the actual base outside. We had it stained, we had it foam cut, we had it glued together, we had the threaded rods put in, and it was stout. It was pretty strong, and I look forward to making things like this again in the future. Now you can find all of that, as I stated before, in its own individual video, and that was an outside workshop video, and it's very long, it's very intricate, and I really just show you a lot of how I built that out. So you can learn a lot from that if you're looking to get into something very similar. So at that point, we moved into the interior studio here, and I began with clay work. Now originally I was using Amico air dry clay. Now this air dry clay in itself, it had a great consistency. It had a great feel. It felt very much like monster clay warmed up, really nice, and it had a great texture. It was terracotta. I got it for $10 for, was it a 10-pound box? And I had problems out of it. So what we had happen is what I did is I went over the entire outside jacket as well as the actual cave hole here with the Amico air dry clay. Now normally in my experience with air dry clay is when it starts to dry, it starts to bind together. Now I went out of my way to make sure that I did this entire rock formation all the way around the entire perimeter of this foam core in one layer. And when you do that, as it dries, because it's moist when you put it together, it binds better as you apply it all the way around. It's one shell, one piece all the way around. There may be seams here and there. That's naturally going to happen as you apply smaller pieces all the way across instead of just one sheet. But it binds itself together, and what it does is, as the water evaporates out of the air dry clay, it tightens to the actual foam core. Amico did not do that. Amico did dry overnight, but the bonds between the Amico itself were too brittle to bind to the item and tighten up. Instead, what it does is it fractured and it cracked all the way across the exterior of the foam core. Maybe it's something I was doing wrong. Maybe it's a faulty old batch. Maybe it's labeled wrong in the system. It could be a multitude of things, and I'm going to figure out what's wrong with it. I'm going to do a full video about how I test the Emeco clay in different ways. We're going to oven bake it. We're going to leave it out. We're going to do a moist pour where we kind of keep it moist for a few days before we let it dry out. We're going to do that. We're going to test it, and maybe when I come back later and make that, I'll link that in the info card above right here. I haven't made it yet, but I will in the future because I'm going to figure out what's wrong with it. Emeco clay, it was an utter failure for this individual project. Okay, I went over the entire failed Emeco clay structure with DOS air dry clay. Now I did a podge method on this because the Emeco clay didn't necessarily just come off completely in all places. So what I did is I tapped it with a screwdriver, and if it popped off, then it was too brittle. And I went over it with DOS air dry clay in this particular areas. But if it didn't pop off and it was still on the actual item, I went over it with DOS in particular areas to strengthen it. So in between all of the cracks around the whole jacket of the rock formation on the base, I went over that with DOS air dry clay in a podge method. If you've never used podge method of anything before, then you probably have, you just don't realize it. You can use liquid clays to do that. You can use plaster. You can use air dry clay like I did here. You can also use concrete. It's most notable in concrete industry. But yeah, so that's what we did to repair the outside rock formation. And of course, we used aluminum foil and a bunch of techniques to actually texture the outside rock formation on this item. So that's where we are at this point here. We have the actual rock formation on the exterior of the base plate completely done. And then I began to work on the top. Now I did cut some XPS foam to go on the very top plate. Very cool, very easy. Now remember, I was going to put a water feature on top of it. The original design I had a water feature, and as will this one here. Now the customer specifically requested the water feature, and they did not want me to forget it, and that is completely fine. I'm okay with that. This customer has been absolutely awesome, and if he's watching this video, dude, you rock and roll, man. He's been very patient throughout the creation process, and I've enjoyed working with him. We've communicated quite a few times through the Etsy Messenger, and that's where he ordered this from. It's been very enjoyable to work with this customer, without a doubt. We sent a lot of reference photos back and forth. We talked about ideas, things like that. I've got approvals throughout the process that he likes the way it's being designed, and it's just really enjoyable to work with great customers. That's all I'm trying to say. So at this point, I had the XPS foam plate for the very top already created, and it was ready to be put on. I did use a little bit of like scrap XPS foam around the outside edges, and I just kind of like sealed that into place with the same Gorilla Glue, and it bonded very well overnight. I just kind of weighted it down there, and it kind of attached very well. Now, a lot of people are like, well, why didn't you just apply the XPS foam on the top in one layer, one piece? I could have done that. Yeah, I could have done that. But did I need to? Not really. And why do I say that? Just like with the cracks down here where you podge over it, it actually strengthens the overall item because you're applying a different medium, a stronger medium, in between a weaker medium. So let's just say the foam is not, it's there. It's never going to be removed. It's stationary. It's glued into place. We're going to use a technique to go over the entire upper portion and reduce weight. What are we going to use to do that? Well, first let's go ahead and create the outside barrier. So I went around the entire outside barrier of this formation with Sculpting air dry clay. Terracotta. We did use a different color because I wanted to distinguish between the two different colors, different types of clay on the actual item itself in that creation video where we are making the rock formation. Full video, it's out there, find it. So we did two different colors. And that created like a dam-like effect all the way around the exterior of the rock formation. Then what I did is I actually mixed up some plaster. Yes, plaster, which tends to be lighter than air dry clays. As I used that plaster and I squeezed it out and I plastered it all throughout the pieces of foam on the top plate. It gave us a lot of variations in depth and detail, and it made it to where it's not just flat all the way across and you have to build up texture over there. So we created a lot of texture just with the plaster layer itself. And we use our finger just to kind of move that plaster around. Very cool, right? That's an advanced technique. Make sure you use it. Once we had that done, I did use a little bit of the existing Sculpey air dry clay to go over some particular areas just to build up a little bit extra rock texture here and there. And remember that this little piece right here that the log is sitting up on, because the log is up at an angle and you can see underneath it, does have a separate piece of XPS foam glued on top of that first layer there. So with the actual top rock formation completely dry, we had the Sculpey original, we had the plaster, we had everything in really ready to go. At that point, we can begin the actual painting process, but we do have to give it a few days because sometimes that the plaster or the air dry clay may dry at different consistencies, and there can be separation between the two items. Usually, the plaster really does bond well to the foam, not just the foam, but actually the clay that you put on itself. Now, I did expedite that quite a bit, and I didn't really just wait until the Sculpey or air dry clay is completely dry. So I kind of really just sped through that project. But then I had to wait at some point for it to dry, and that's really what took the most time for the majority of these projects here. Is you have to give the clay and the substrate you're using time to dry before you can move on to the next step. You have to wait. If you expedite it too fast, then you're going to get bleeding, you're going to get cracking, you're going to get just what happens if you go over this entire outside edge with let's just say the flocking or the rock texture, and then it finds out that it's not actually dry, it's still dry, and then it cracks right there in the middle of your perfectly painted rock formation. You gotta wait the time to have it dry, and that's just part of the process of creating something this massive. This is a massive project, guys. Like, this thing is not just mass by the actual spider being the biggest in the world by mass, but the actual project itself is massive in detail. And these types of items, when you go up to a certain grade or scale of items, do take longer to create because of certain things. So once we were done with that, we actually went ahead and primed the entire outside of this in a Mars black. It may have actually been like a lamp black, like just a craft paint black. And then I went ahead and started the actual rock painting texture. Now, I did go a little bit brown with the rock this time. I just really felt like it was pulling me that way. So I used a lot of ink, acrylic inks, and some different dry brushing techniques to get a really great overall golden brown rock formation. And as you can see in this B clip here, the rock formation just really looks great. And of course, we don't want to cover it up, but we just have to. We have to cover it up with flocking and earth materials. So once that was done, we started in with the flocking. Now, I really felt like I wasn't being rushed, but I also felt bad because the customer had already been waiting for quite a long time for me to just build this base. And because it was something I never really done before, and because I was trying to record it for him to enjoy for later as well, because he can watch these videos from Germany, right? I really wanted to take my time and do this the right way, and that made the time frame push out a little bit, and I really felt bad. So I went ahead at that point and just jumped the gun, even before everything was fully dried with paint, and I went over it with a fine flocking here. Now, the fine flocking, a lot of times you can get it at Michael's, you can get it online. I really recommend Green Stuff World. Their prices are a little bit higher sometimes depending on what type of flocking you're looking for, but the overall quality of that flocking is just grade A better. Now, sometimes I can't find the flocking that I necessarily want, and we're going to get to that later in this video, is that sometimes you just got to make your own or figure out a way to make your own, and that's just the way it is. Now, throughout this whole process, we're never going to use anything organic in the creation of this. Now, my original ones that I send out for the Americas do have organics in them that have been baked in alcohol to purify them of any kind of bacteria, parasites, or anything. They're purified. They're just like what you'd buy at Michael's in little plastic baggies of dried rocks, right? So nothing in this is organic material at all. Everything here is handmade from clay or from scratch. Pretty cool, right? So I went over the entire outside edge of outside rock formation with the flocking. Now, what you'll notice here is that the flocking actually cascades down and over the bark textures. So you really can see down here at the bottom that there is a bark texture, but up here at the top it kind of blends in a little bit. And that's where that abstract type of look comes into it. I labeled this an abstract project, and it kind of is. I really enjoyed it. But because there's bark, rock, it's really abstract, and I think it looks really cool. So the flocking continues down onto the edges, and it just kind of blends everything together. And of course, as we go over that with Mod Podge that we're using to attach that flocking, it really seals everything up and makes it very strong. Mod Podge layers over the entire project really are a great way to bond everything. Speaking of which, I did go over the entire rock formation before flocking with Mod Podge. Just a nice thick layer of Mod Podge. It made the rock very glistening, and it also binds the rock together in another way, another layer, right? So that's another technique you can use if you want to go over it with, not with a spray paint layer, but also just a water-based PVA glue like Mod Podge. You could do that also. So at this point in the video, I began to focus more so on the log. So I created this out of 2 tumblers here. We attached those together. Now I did get a crack along the original clay formation here. We used originally Sculpting original oven baked clay to create this this log formation here. And I usually do that so I can go ahead and get a bake in. It bakes up really hard and gives us an initial base to work off of. That's where the majority of that log texture is, right here. And what we really did is we challenged ourselves in a way that I've really never challenged myself with before. I've been experimenting with magnets. Now I am going to start creating, if I haven't done so already at the release of this video, a whole line of magnets. About 2 or 3 sets per. But anyway, so I'm working with magnets. And I really wanted to create a next level because last time I shipped this, one of the legs broke. No one wants to receive a broken item. And the reason it broke is because I was shipping the spider body and the legs already attached. And in hindsight, if I do that, I need to create a molded foam block that the spider sits into, and then there's enough foam piece that seals it up. It's tough to do that sometimes. It would take a lot of foam work, or what I could do is I could just make the legs detachable. Okay. So, with that being said, we're going to roll into that in just a minute. Just think about that, magnets. When I came in to create these branches, the first branch on the front was the first one to be created. I usually always include that. It keeps the log from rolling forward, and it's just a really cool feature. Looking at the front of the item, that you see a branch right here. It's pretty cool. Now, I also put a knot on the back. But then what I did is I went above and beyond, and on the very back side, I have 2 branches that are coming up like that. The only reason that I put them there is because I needed something for that back leg to sit onto. Here in a moment, we're going to go ahead and twirl this around. I'm going to show you the back side of this and some of the designs on that as well. So I also needed a way to support the actual body of the spider, because if the legs aren't supporting the weight, then what's supporting the weight of that massive body? Because it's big, it's heavy, it's got some weight to it. So I actually created 2 branches, or a big branch stem that comes out, and it's actually on the bottom of the spider itself. I did sink 2 magnets in that. There are also 2 magnets inside the spider abdomen and carapace as well on the very bottom. So the body on the very top comes off, and the magnets stay on the log. So when it's shipped, the main body of the rock will be shipped, the log will be shipped, the legs and the carapace and the abdomen will be all shipped separately. So we used a lot of magnets in this. Each leg has a magnet set into it. I also, on the original casted design, came back and I used DOS air dry clay to extend the leg out away from the original casted leg. And I molded each individual leg into the actual carapace. So each leg, although a little roughly, really blend well with the existing body. Absolutely next level. Each leg has its own individually sculpted piece that attaches it to the body, or blends it as it were. Each one is also hand painted and clear coated before we actually paint the actual leg itself. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of drive time. And because each one has its own magnet set into it, which means that I had to use a Dremel tool to drill out each individual socket on the body and on the leg itself. And then what I did is I rotated them positive, negative, negative, positive, positive, negative. So that way they don't attach to the wrong one. Next level stuff right there, guys. It took a lot of time to get my process down pat, but this is absolutely incredible. So that means that when I go in to ship this to the customer, I will create a diagram and label each leg 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. So that way when they pull it out of the box, they know exactly where each individual leg goes on the actual item itself. And that brings us back to the actual log itself. So the bark texture is around each individual hole. So like for instance, on the very top, I created like a little divot for the leg to sit into. The back side, all of them have like a little itty bitty sculpted groove on the original log formation that the leg will kind of sit into. And that signifies that that's where that leg is supposed to go. That's the way it's shaped. That's the way it's supposed to sit there. So the back sides do look like the legs are making contact with a surface. You get what I'm saying? And that's why we needed to sculpt the bark and the branches in particular ways. I also came in later on and I gave this a good spray paint clear coat. That's an aerosol clear coat before I attached the actual bark formation. And then after the bark was applied, I also gave it a secondary spray coat paint. It makes it look very wet and moist, just like it would be in an ecosystem, whether it's outside here or in the rainforest. Okay, it's not supposed to be any particular type of wood or anything like that, but it's just supposed to be wood that's decaying. Now on the inside of the log, I did something a little bit different. I just incorporated just a lot of deep dark paints and browns on the inside. We sculpted a little bit of that existing bark texture going into the lateral log, but you can see up inside there, and it's nice and dark and black, right? So there's also a little divot around the right hand side where it shows that there could be a simulated hole inside of the log where you can see into it, but it's just black paint where you can't see inside of it, right? But looking at a distance, it makes it look the log has a hole in it. We use a few trinkets here, and I also usually try to incorporate something surprise-like inside of that log hole. Sometimes I'll incorporate a snake skin, or in this situation, I used a wasp nest, and we actually attached that to the upper portion of the actual log formation so that the actual wasp nest is holding right where it's supposed to be. And it just makes it a little bit level of decay, and there's bugs and ecosystem around it. I also came in and started to apply the thicker flocking at that point. We also applied a little bit of fine flocking to the actual log itself. And all of that is from Green Stuff World, as well as I had got a little bit of that from a bag at Walmart, and I churned it up and made a little fine powder out of it. And all that is held into place with a Mod Podge in different ways, and also incorporated that into the actual log formation itself. Now, at this point, you're thinking to yourself, wow, there's something on that diorama that he hasn't talked about yet. And you're right. That's this spider down here. Throughout the creation process, I went ahead and bored a hole with the hot wire cutters, and I sculpted in a rock cave formation. Now, there is a spider in here, and you can see him when you're looking for him. Otherwise, he's just kind of like, ah, like I'm here. He is inside there, and these legs are actually glued into place. So when I go to ship this will get extra support right here. I'll probably put a box right there to kind of keep that protected. And we have flocking all the way around them. We have some of the dirt. We have some of the debris, the vegetation. And it's really just, he's hand painted and glued into place with a black rock formation behind him. So it makes it look like there's a spider deep inside there, deep inside this dark hole. And it's like, oh, don't touch it, don't touch it. It's just something extra that I thought that I would add into the item, not only because it would challenge me as an artist to create an additional item in this, but something has to separate this out as the gold standard. And having two spiders, maybe one like not fully built inside the hole, but you can see him in there, and then having this massive one on top just is next level. So we had the actual hard flocking put into position, and then also I needed to create the actual dirt. Now, you can buy dirt flocking. You can buy all sorts of dirt flocking. I wanted to challenge myself to create my own. So I actually use sawdust. I use a multitude of pigments and inks and paints. And I made my own flocking in a red shade and a dark brown shade. And I actually laid this out to dry. And it created an absolute incredible dirt formation. And here's some of it actually off to the side now. It's actually getting really dry. When I applied it to this, it was still a little bit damp, so I let it dry on the actual item itself. Now, it's not as dark as it was because it's kind of dehydrating now, but you can see it's kind of colored. But so you would apply this to your item, and then you would stain it. You would stain it with inks as you see fit. So I do use an ink spray around the entire thing, and it darkens out the rock, it darkens out the moss, makes it look like it's been blended for a very long time, and it's not so bright. You can see how bright this is up here. Down here it's very dark and dingy because that has a spray on it. Once I had some of the dirt flocking into place, I had a lot of the vegetation into place, I had all the moss into place, I started to move on to the actual water feature. Now, the water feature is something the customer specifically asked for. But I can't just pour a water feature and have nothing in it. It would just be like clear resin. It would look just really shoddy, right? It would be too pure. So what we decided to do is I sculpted some hand-sculpted leaves. And you'll see these throughout the overall project. There's some hanging out of the log. There's some down here. There's some on the actual top of the log up there. And what they are doing is I made impressions of them in the same way I did for the Bart. And I've hand detail painted those. You'll be able to find those in a little micro video later on. But it was actually a really enjoyable process. I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to doing it again. It was a very fun process. Now, I did incorporate 2 small acorns into the actual water feature just because they look really cool, and I wasn't really willing to go out of my way to sculpt those items, but I really wanted to incorporate something very cool and intricate into the actual water feature. Yes, it's organic material and it's natural to our ecosystem here, but I sealed it in resin, so don't judge me, y'all. So the actual epoxy pour that we use is a Flynn Sister 2-part epoxy regular set, and I dyed that with Tim Holtz alcohol inks of different levels, drop, 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 one at a time, until I got the consistency and color I wanted, and we poured that into the water feature. Now just remember that I sealed that hole or the divot for the water feature with Mod Podge 2 or 3 layers before I applied that, because you don't want to pour like a water feature and all of a sudden it drains out of the bottom. So make sure you go ahead and seal that up with the Mod Podge. Let it dry for a few times. That way you get that nice sealed action. You don't lose all of the resin into the actual foam core that you were working with. I also then came in with a UV resin and gave it just a little bit of a ripple texture on top of the water, just to make it a little more realistic and things like that. So other than that, we did set the actual frog. That's one of the original casted frogs that I had created way back in the day when I first started mold making. He has his own level of flaws, but he's really fun to create as well. And then we kind of set him into position so that he's just barely poking up out of the water, and then look right above him is this massive Goliath Birdeater Tarantula. This thing is a beast. It is the biggest spider by mass in the world, and I really did enjoy creating it. Now, this is almost an entire like 1.5 feet in length if you measure from here all the way across its carapace into the back leg. This thing is massive. Now, this is a little bit large, quite a bit, maybe a little bit larger than they would occur in captivity. I do believe that they, if I understand correctly, I do believe they get a lot larger in like the Amazon and just natural ecosystems. Somebody who's an expert on the spiders and watching this, let me know in the comments below. How big is yours? From leg to leg, how big are they? How big is the carapace and the abdomen? This thing is a beast. I maximize this size for a reason. Now here in the near future, I get to go in and I actually get to paint a purple one of these. Super excited for that. That's going to be absolutely beautiful and it's going to be cool. And we'll probably use a little bit of airbrush to do that. Now for the body itself, we did use a variety of paints, all acrylics, as well as some acrylic inks to create the richness of the body. Now I also went over the outside edges of the legs as well as around the mouth. And some of the carapace with these, it's basically a grass flocking from Green Stuff World. It's really great quality, and I have like a little container of it. I've made 2 of these spiders, as well as did some grass features on some items, and they're actually awesome. You can come in and you can kind of trim these after they're attached. Now I just use E6000 to attach these to the actual item itself. And when I do that, I do try to catch a lot of the hairs or the grass pieces to recycle back into the container. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll let them fall down and I'll just let them sit there. And if they survive the shipping process, then it's all for the better, because in the natural world, these are friable hairs, and they do rub their legs together and those hairs fly off. and actually these hairs can really like agitate your eyes and your skin. It's a defensive mechanism. And what they do is they rub their legs together, and it kind of releases those hairs. It's a defensive mechanism. It's pretty cool. Someone who's more of a spider expert can kind of tell us more about that. So if you have any information about these spiders that you would like to share with us, leave a description of that in the comments below. Now, there's a lot of spider experts out there, so if you have any details that you would like to share with us about the Goliath Birdeater, maybe you have one, or maybe you've been in contact with one, leave a comment below, and we can always go in there and have a discussion, or just share your knowledge with us, guys, because I'm just here as an artist creating this bad boy, but you may have experienced or had one of these in your own collection, in your home, so hey, that's pretty cool. So let us know how the size and then what the color is, and then let us know below what kind of details that you would change about this to make it more of a realistic habitat. Maybe not the actual rainforest texture, but just the overall small details here and there about the spider. Now, moving from the top of the spider back down, I will notate that I did finish off the bottom of the item with a layer of carpet as well as rubber soled feet, so that way the actual bottom of the wood panel or wood board is projected up off of the actual countertop itself. It gives the overall diorama a more professional grade look, and it also keeps it from scuffing any kind of surfaces that the customer may want to put this diorama on top of. If they put this on a nice mahogany table, I don't want it to scuff up their table, because it does have those threads and washers on the bottom of the item. Those threads and washers can always be accessed from a different way by the customer if they ever really had to, but I don't want those to be visible in any way. All right? Otherwise, guys, what do you think? I think this thing turned out absolutely incredible. I really do hope you guys enjoyed the overall B-roll that we went over with this video. If you want to see any of these other long-form content videos, whether it be the actual creating the base outside, painting a little bit of spider here and there, sculpting the log and the bark textures, doing the water feature, making the handmade flocking out of the wood shavings, applying anything to the outside of it, repairing that rock formation. You can find all of that under my overall homepage, but also the actual Goliath Birdeater Tarantula diorama series here on my YouTube channel. Make sure you like and subscribe, guys. I really do hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully I didn't monologue too long, but I also wanted to give a big special thank you to this customer from Germany. They have been absolutely patient through the entire process, and I have really enjoyed working with them on Etsy throughout the entire journey of this artistic creation. Again, they are the first one to get this, and I really do hope they enjoyed the overall process. I will catch you guys on the next awesome video. Later, guys.